Welcome to Around the ECHL. We go around the league every single Wednesday and talk with some of the great names and great voices from around our league. And today, the pleasure of speaking with the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears, Jesse Liebman, a guy I've known for a long time, going back to the beginning days for the Americans in the ECHL when he was the voice of the Ontario Reign. We'll talk to him about a familiar lineup. You'll know some names on this roster, including Michael Brodzinski, who was a part of our team back in 17-18. That all coming up. Our, of course, segment brought to you by the TRU by Hilton. They're a great partner of Allen American Hockey, and the visiting teams, when they come to town, stay at TRU by Hilton, one of the great hotels here in Allen and in North Texas. Jesse Liebman, the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears, when we return around the ECHL. Welcome to Around the ECHL, brought to you each week by TRU by Hilton, the official away partner of the Allen Americans. When the visiting teams come to town, they stay at TRU by Hilton. And we are excited to welcome the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears this morning, Mr. Jesse Liebman. And now I've known you for a long time, going back to your days with the Ontario Reign, which seems like forever ago.
It certainly does seem like an eternity, but thanks for having me on, Tommy. It's good to be back.
Great to see you as always. Excited to have Orlando coming to town this week. It's not often that we have a team from the Eastern Conference come in. And, you know, we get that request every year. Please, can we see someone other than Wichita, Tulsa, Kansas City? So a rare opportunity. Last time you guys were here back in 17-18. So it's been a couple of minutes. I know you guys are off to a good start right there in the thick of things, third overall in the division. Give us an update on your season.
Well, the team has been really, really strong at home, but as if you take a look at the schedule, there have been some bumps in the road when the team is playing away from the Advent Health rink at Amway Center. So I think it'll make for a very intriguing matchup this weekend with the pair of games coming up against Allen.
So we know that if you talked about how the standings reflect Florida, the Everblades, Jacksonville, Orlando. You guys have the top three spots in the division. I know it's such a competitive rivalry between the three of you. Florida has kind of been the king of that castle for a bit right now, but talk about that rivalry. Fans know about the rivalry between Allen and Wichita and Tulsa, the teams we play all the time. What's it like when you go into Florida on a Friday night?
You know, it's interesting. The last 4 times that the Solar Bears have qualified for the Kelly Cup playoffs, they have met the Florida Everblades at some point along the way. Still looking for that first playoff series win. I think when that day finally comes, I think our fan base will cherish that almost as much as ultimately a Kelly Cup victory. And if the road to a Kelly Cup for Orlando leads through Estero, Florida, where the Everblades play, that'll make it all much more sweeter. But it's been a fairly intense rivalry. There have been a couple of fair share of brawls over the years. Jacksonville and Orlando, relatively newer with the Icemen coming on board, or rather that franchise getting reactivated in 17-18. It's been a very interesting matchup, kind of a fun fact, if you will. The Solar Bears have never lost at home against Jacksonville, 23-0 extending into this season. Kind of a unreal streak to keep going now in the 5th year of this rivalry. But hopefully that's something that they're able to continue with a couple of more meetings still ahead on the schedule.
Well, you know, it's funny because when you ask coaches about, you know, the long tradition of winning against a particular team, they'll say, well, that team is different than this team. It really doesn't matter, you know, but history shows that it does. I look at, you know, my Buffalo Bills and Tom Brady going into the game this past weekend, 30-2 against Buffalo over his career. That is an amazing number for one person, but it does happen.
I was actually at that game.
Were you really?
I was.
Oh, man, I'm jealous. How much fun was that?
It was an entertaining game. I had never witnessed NFL football in overtime before, but that was my second Bucs game of the year that I had been to. Pretty intriguing matchup. So, and luckily the tickets came via friends, so all I had to do was pay for a couple of drinks, and that was that.
That's even better. What do you think about my boy Josh Allen there? He's good young quarterback, huh?
He's impressive. He's, I'm a Jets fan, unfortunately, so I'm resigned to misery. It seems like it loves company, but Allen seems to be kind of leading that new wave of Buffalo Bills, hopefully to hopefully the Glory they seem to have a preference to utilize him, and they go to him a lot with going to the air. The run game, they don't really rely as heavily on that. So it was interesting to see how much confidence he plays with, which it was very impressive.
This is Jesse Lieben, the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears for the last several years. We mentioned he was actually a part of a playoff series against Allen back in his days with the Ontario Reign. Taking a look at your roster, Aaron Luchuk's off to another great year, 22 points. But another name on the list that Americans fans will know, Michael Brodzinski, who was here early in his career, second on your team in scoring with 15 points.
Yeah, he is one of the top scoring defensemen in the Eastern Conference right now, off to a pretty hot start. Previously, he had played with the Solar Bears during the 18-19 and 19-20 seasons. Last year, he spent the season overseas in Slovan of the Slovak Extraliga, but ultimately opportunity to come back to North America this season. And he's been that number one power play anchor on the back end for the Solar Bears, and certainly a reliable two-way presence. So his impact has been felt along with a couple of other players on our blue line, but he has probably been our perhaps most consistent two-way defenseman that we've had so far this year.
You know, it's interesting, Jesse, because, Matt Register was here early in his career and was cut by the Allen Americans. And then he went to Tulsa and he went to Colorado, and his career kind of took off. I remember when, an unfortunate memory for Michael Brodzinski, who I like a lot, great kid, got a chance to see him at the All-Star game a couple of years ago. Had one of the horrible turnovers in team history, and in a backhand blind pass that he put in front of the net back in a series against Colorado, and Belzile pokes it past Riley Gill, and it was the difference in that series right there. But I'm happy to see him doing well. Got a pretty famous girlfriend too. They might be married by now, but I know at the All-Star game a couple of years ago had a chance to chat with both of them. It's interesting sometimes with goalies and defensemen. It takes them a little bit longer to get going, but then all of a sudden, it's like something like you turn on a water faucet and the water just starts coming. It doesn't stop. And with Brodzinski, it's been that way. It's exciting to see him and his career really turn. And he's now, like you mentioned, not only one of the best offensive defensemen, in the Eastern Conference, but one of the best in the league.
I would say that's a fair assessment. I think he has definitely evolved into one of the premier defensemen in the ECHL. He probably, if he wanted to, could find a reliable spot on an American Hockey League lineup if you stacked him up against any one of the defensemen in that league as well. But he seems to have carved out a niche that suits him here at the AA level for sure.
Get sunshine for the whole squad at Tropical Smoothie Cafe.
Let's talk about your goaltending. We know Brad Barone. He played in Utah. He's been around this league a bit, and now obviously he's played in the majority of the games for you this season. Talk about goaltending and Brad Barone in particular.
Well, Barone has been certainly a stabilizing presence. He was not originally on our training camp roster at the start of the year, but we added him just prior to opening night. Didn't play right away. We had a pair of goaltenders in Zach Amon and Amir Miftahov. So Amon is a San Jose Sharks prospect, Miftahov a Tampa Bay Lightning prospect. But that opening week of the preseason, there was an injury up in the American Hockey League with the Syracuse Crunch to Max Legacy, a goaltender there. So Miftahov went up. We brought in Barone as kind of an insurance policy. And Amon won our opening night game at home against Atlanta. But ever since Barone got into his first couple of real reps for the team, he's really taken off. There's been back and forth movement with all of our other goaltenders. We brought in a handful already. Some have gone to Europe. Some were traded, as others were brought back from the American Hockey League. But Barone has been, I guess you could say, knock on wood, the stabilizing presence in goal so far this season for the Bears.
There are some names on your roster that Americans fans will know going back to even last season. Kyle Topping, of course, his brother played here in Allen. Christoph Rabik, who I love, that one of the best names in hockey. He obviously, the San Jose connection, as you mentioned there earlier. I know Jake McGrew as well. Those guys who played in handful of games this year. What's the relationship been like with San Jose?
Well, with San Jose, we've had some familiarity with that organization dating back to the 2018-19 season. That's what allowed us to have players like Colby McCauley and Michael Brodzinski first assigned to us when they were still on their entry-level NHL deals. In McCauley's case, he was on an American Hockey League contract. But that relationship, I guess, in a manner of sense, kind of reactivated itself last year, midway through the season, with a couple of players being assigned to Orlando via the San Jose Barracuda and Sharks organizations, and that seems to have resumed this season and continued on. So there's been a handful of guys, players like Zach Amon, players like Montana Onyebuchi, Steen Pashnuk, Jake McGrew, as you mentioned, Christoph Rabik, Kyle Topping, that have been able to plug and parcel into the lineup on an as-needed basis. The Sharks kind of dealt with some COVID protocol scenarios earlier in the season that resulted in a number of players being called up and really kind of leaving us scrambling to fill some roster spots, unfortunately. But we were able to make some solid pickups. Cannon Pieper has been something of a revelation for us right now, currently fourth in team scoring, and was sitting at home in Boston after getting released from the Iowa Heartlanders after only 2 games. But he's picked up 8 points in 16 games for Orlando, including his first ECHL goals. So he's been a diamond in the rough that the coaching staff has been able to find, so to speak.
When you look at the Allen roster, and I know you probably have this week just to kind of see what's going on here, the team's been playing better of late. They have a 3-game winning streak. They've won 3 straight games on the road, going back to the final game of the Idaho series. And, you know, no coincidence that it's the return of Jack Combs. Eric Roy was out on the commissioner's exempt list for a bit. Chad Costello, you know, as he says, I'm a slow starter, but, you know, give me some time, I'll get going. Asachuk having another solid year for the Americans. When you look at this roster, does it almost take you back to the Ontario Reign days when, you know, a lot of those names were on the roster? Jack Combs?
Well, certainly. And you mentioned Jack Combs that year at 14-15, it was spin the wheel and see where Jack Combs is going to be this week. It seemed like every time he would get released, he'd be picked up by another team on waivers, just trying to make his way back to Allen.
Yes.
So I'm sure that caused some anxiety, but certainly, as we all know, history seemed to work out for you guys for that year and the following season as well.
Well, Greenville won the lottery when he went on waivers, and I remember Steve Martinson said there's not a chance he's going to end up falling back to us, and sure enough, he ended up going to Greenville. That was a crazy the Combs sweepstakes, if you will.
Yeah. So, but again, you mentioned all those other names: Costello, Asachuk, Eric Roy. Just a very stacked forward lineup for the Americans, and it certainly will be a formidable test, I can only imagine. And familiar face as well, Ryan Lowen, assigned via the Charlotte Checkers, Seattle Kraken pipeline, spent the last 2 seasons, or parts of the last 2 seasons, with the Solar Bears when he was under contract with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I'm sure there will be some pleasant exchanges across the red line during warmups.
Yeah, in Luke Henman, who was just here, and you know what? No surprise, I nominated him for Player of the Week. Sure enough, he gets reassigned yesterday. But the kid was amazing in 3 games. You know, goal and assist, shorthanded goal in his first game. He gets a hat trick in his second game here, and then picked up another assist on Sunday. 6 points in 3 games, and whoop, just like that, he's gone. That's you and I deal with this all the time, and you never know. You kind of keep an eye on the transactions every day, or get that email from your American Hockey League affiliate. Okay, who's going, who's coming? It's been that way this year. Lowen was here, played very, very well, gone. Now he hasn't played much, obviously, when he was returned to Charlotte. You know, Antoine Bebeau here for a cup of coffee, gone again. You know, Henman here for 3 games. Heard it might be 5 or 6, but you know, he's gone again. That's just kind of the way it goes as an ECHL team, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. The league will always remind people that it's simply the ECHL now. It's no longer the East Coast Hockey League. But quite honestly, Tommy, it might as well stand for ever-changing hockey league at this point with all the roster turnover. So I think this is just simply par for the course. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is a developmental league. It's designed to advance players onto the next stage in their careers, whatever that stage may happen to be. whether it's the American Hockey League, eventually the NHL, or in some cases, some guys hang around for a little bit, or in other cases, they depart and continue on to Europe. But I think if you are playing at this level, certainly if you're playing on an ECHL contract, you're doing it because you love this game so very much.
Below Zero Cryo, whole body cryotherapy stimulates the body's natural healing abilities through exposure to extreme cold. Cryotherapy was developed in Japan in 1978 as a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. Over the past 3 decades, it's become even more popular as its performance-enhancing and general health and wellness benefits have become more well-known. Call Below Zero Cryo for an appointment today. 469-362-8191. Below Zero Cryo is located at 8715 Lebanon Road, Suite 400 in Frisco. Well, on the broadcast on Sunday, I was selling the fact, hey fans, you don't get to see teams from the East very often. Orlando, one of the more attractive teams in the league. So if you're selling your hockey team to the Allen fans right now and why they should buy tickets for this Friday and Saturday, give us your best pitch here.
I would say that this is certainly an exciting team. There have been some instances this year where the Bears, and in previous years, this just seems to be a team that you can never truly count out, even if they are down by a goal or two. This tends to be a team that there's always a little bit of magic somehow left in this team from time to time. I look back at pre-pandemic. We had a televised game back in February of 2020, trailing to the Norfolk Admirals by a 4-2 score in the final minute of regulation. And Michael Brodzinski, of all people, scored 2 goals in a 24-second span to tie it. And ultimately, we were able to win in overtime. So that was our military appreciation night game, February 15th of 2020. And that just seems to be the case. Last year, we were trailing 3-0 to the South Carolina Stingrays on the road, ended up winning 6-3. So this is a team that certainly knows how to battle. You've got the leading scorer or the reigning scoring champion, I should say, in Aaron Luchuk, a couple of offensive weapons, a couple of familiar faces as well. Players that you mentioned, Brodzinski, Topping, among others, Steen Pashnuk, that have played in Allen before. So if you're an Americans fan, I would certainly recommend you get a ticket for this weekend's slate of games.
One thing that, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, and unfortunately, it's not a good remembrance from the last time you were here, and that was Riley Gill got hurt, and of course, never played again for the Allen Americans. What do you remember about that night?
Well, it was an interesting evening. I remember the play almost exactly in my mind as it unfolded. Jean Dupuis, who is known for being a relatively clean player, just kind of got upended and went feet first into Gill. Kind of an unfortunate set of circumstances that led to the injury for Gill. I'm pretty sure none of us had envisioned that would be the end of his career. Certainly a very storybook career at this level, with championships with Reading, and certainly, of course, with what he was able to do with the Americans franchise. And unfortunate to see his career end on the way it did. I'm sure that was not how he envisioned going out. But if there is maybe perhaps some bad blood between these two teams, I think it would only extend maybe by the coaches. I don't know of any Solar Bears players that are currently on our roster that would have played in that game then. But perhaps there are still some players with the Americans that maybe have some bad reservations about the last time these two teams squared off.
Are you going to be making the trip?
I will not, but I'll be on the remote call here back in Orlando. So I'll be about an hour ahead of you guys, but nevertheless, I'm looking forward to a hard-fought series.
Well, I was hoping we might get to catch up for lunch or dinner, but hey, I understand. I'm doing the same thing here, is calling those games remotely. And I got to say, much better this year. We had a lot of issues last season trying to pull that off, and knock on wood, we have not had any problems whatsoever this year with the remote broadcast. So we'll miss you, but good to see your face here this morning. I like the Lightning plaque in the background there. Do you get to go to many games?
I've had a chance to make a trip down to Amalie Arena for a handful of games the last few years. Was actually at Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. So that was certainly an experience to see the cup lifted in person during that celebration, sitting up in the press box. So still kind of virtual, though. There wasn't any media presence in the locker room following the game. But a couple of former Solar Bears employees now working for the Lightning organization as well. So it was exciting to see them have their moment that evening, for sure.
Well, You know what? Always great to see you, the former voice of the Ontario Reign. That's a chance I got to meet Jesse back, our first year in the ECHL. And boy, I tell you what, you talking about taking on two of the giants of that league for a team coming in from the Central League, Ontario, then South Carolina. That was quite a challenge. And you know what? If we go back and remember that third period, the last game in Ontario, I mean, the Americans were down to their final breath before finally they got things going in that third period. So fond memories for Allen fans. Always great to see you, my friend, one of the great young broadcasters in this league. And have yourself a great week, and let me know if I can do anything to help you on this end.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Tommy, and happy holidays to you as well, and all the Americans fans listening in.
Happy holidays to the great Jesse Lieben, the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears, lives in one of the great parts of the country. Can you imagine waking up every day, temperature in the 70s, count on probably 20 minutes of rain sometime during the day, and a golf course pretty much on every corner? That's what Jesse wakes up to every day. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thank you.
Hello, Americans fans. Former American defenseman Nolan Dakota here with a message from Fast Signs in Plano. Both Plano locations are independently owned and operated by myself and are proud partners with the Americans for this season and the Americans Drive for Five. At Fast Signs, we understand the burden this difficult time presents on businesses, and helping you to solve your changing visual communication and business challenges is our commitment. Mention this ad when you call Fast Signs in Plano for 10% off your next order. Fast Signs, more than fast, more than signs.